I want a divorce after 9 months of marriage. Am I being immature? That was the question I typed into my phone at 3 a.m., sitting in my car in the driveway of our dream home. The house we'd saved for, planned for, decorated together down to the last throw pillow. The house that now felt like a beautifully staged prison with granite countertops and a mortgage I could barely pronounce. People will tell you the warning signs are obvious in hindsight. They're wrong. Sometimes the warning signs are so small, so incremental, that you don't notice the walls closing in until you can barely breathe. The changes happen like weather, a degree at a time, until suddenly you're standing in a storm wondering when the sky turned dark. It started with opinions, small ones. The way I laughed was too loud. My friendships were too consuming. My career ambitions were selfish. Lennox had a way of packaging criticism as concern, wrapping control in the language of love. He made isolation feel like intimacy. Every boundary he crossed came disguised as devotion. I just want what's best for us, he'd say. And I believed him, for longer than I should have. The wedding was everything my mother had dreamed of. 300 guests, imported flowers, a dress that cost more than my first car. Standing at the altar, I remember feeling like I was watching someone else's life unfold. The champagne toasts, the first dance, the tearful speeches about forever. It all felt like a performance I hadn't rehearsed for. My hands shook when I said the vows. My sister pulled me aside at the reception. "You don't look happy," she whispered, her eyes searching mine for the truth I couldn't speak. I told her it was just nerves. Brides are supposed to be nervous. But she knew. Even then she knew. The honeymoon was when the mask began to slip. Small comments about what I ordered at restaurants, monitoring my social media, asking me to check in whenever I left our hotel room. I told myself this was what commitment looked like. I told myself I was lucky someone cared so much about my whereabouts, my safety, my every move. By month 3, I'd stopped calling my best friend Paloma. By month 5, I'd turned down a promotion because Lennox said we needed to focus on starting a family. By month 7, I didn't recognize my own reflection. The woman staring back had hollow eyes and practiced smiles that never reached them. The incident that broke me wasn't dramatic. There was no screaming, no violence, nothing that would make headlines. It was a Tuesday evening, and I'd made dinner, his favorite, chicken parmesan with homemade sauce that took 3 hours to simmer. He came home, glanced at the table without sitting, and said, "I told my mother we'd eat at her place tonight." When I reminded him that he'd never mentioned any plans, he looked at me with such cold certainty and said, "I did. You just don't listen. You never listen." I spent that night questioning my own memory, my own sanity, and somewhere in that spiral of self-doubt something clicked. This wasn't love. This was erasure. Piece by piece, I was disappearing into someone else's design. My dad called the next morning just to check in. I couldn't speak. The silence stretched so long he finally said, "Whatever it is, you can come home." Those 6 words undid me completely. I've spent the last 2 weeks gathering evidence. Bank statements, screenshots, a journal of every time he's made me feel small, crazy, invisible. My therapist says I'm doing the right thing. My lawyer says I have a solid case. But yesterday, everything changed. I was packing a bag, preparing to leave while Lennox was at work, when I found something in his desk drawer. A folder, hidden beneath old tax documents and expired warranties. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, of me, taken without my knowledge, at the grocery store, at my office, walking into my mom's house. Pictures from angles that meant someone had been watching, following, documenting my every routine. And at the very bottom, a single piece of paper with a name and address I'd never seen before. A man named Corbin Watts. An address 20 minutes from my childhood home. Beneath it, in Lennox's careful handwriting, "If she tries to leave." My hands haven't stopped shaking since. I don't remember driving to my parents' house. One moment, I was standing in Lennox's office, the folder clutched against my chest like evidence of my own haunting. The next, I was parked in my childhood driveway, engine still running, staring at the yellow porch light my dad always left on. The folder sat in my passenger seat. I couldn't look at it, couldn't stop thinking about it. If she tries to leave. 4 words. 4 words that turned my escape plan into something else entirely. Something with teeth. My phone buzzed. A text from Lennox. "Running late at work. Don't wait up." The casualness of it made my stomach turn. He had no idea I'd found it. No idea that the careful architecture of his control was now visible to me in all its terrifying detail. I grabbed the folder and walked to the front door on legs that didn't feel like mine. My mom answered before I could knock. She took one look at my face and pulled me inside without a word, the way mothers do when words would only delay what matters. My dad appeared from the living room, reading glasses still perched on his nose. Crossword puzzle abandoned mid-clue. "I found something," I said. My voice sounded foreign, thin. "I need you to see this." We sat at the kitchen table. The same table where I'd done homework, blown out birthday candles, announced my engagement with champagne, and tears of what I thought was joy. Now I spread photographs across its surface like cards in a game I didn't know I was playing. My mom's hand went to her mouth. My dad's jaw tightened in that way it does when he's trying to stay calm for everyone else's sake. "These were taken over months," I explained, pointing to timestamps barely visible in the corners. "Look, this one is from March. I was picking up prescriptions. This one is from my lunch break in April. And this," I swallowed hard, "this is from last week, outside your house." My dad picked up the paper with Corbin Watts' name. He read it twice, 3 times. Then he looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger exactly, but something deeper. Something that had been waiting, perhaps, for confirmation of what he'd always suspected. "Who is this man?" my mom asked. "I don't know. I've never heard the name before." My dad was already on his phone, typing. There's a way to find out. My sister arrived within the hour. She lived 40 minutes away, but somehow made it in 30, still wearing her hospital scrubs from her shift in the pediatric ward. She didn't ask questions at first. She just held me, her arm steady and sure, the way she'd held me when I was 7 and convinced there were monsters in my closet. Turns out I'd been right about the monsters. They just looked different than I'd imagined. I called my friend Renata, my sister said once she'd seen the folder. She's a detective with the county. She's coming over. Tonight? Tonight. Renata Okonkwo arrived at 9:30, still in her work clothes, but with the kind of focused energy that made the room feel safer, just by her presence. She was tall, with close-cropped hair and eyes that missed nothing. My sister had told me they'd met through a domestic violence awareness program the hospital partnered with. Renata had seen cases like mine before. Too many of them. She looked through the photographs methodically, her face betraying nothing. When she reached the paper with Corbin Watts' name, she paused. This address, she said. I recognize this area. It's rural, isolated properties, not the kind of place you stumble upon by accident. What does that mean? I asked. Renata set the paper down carefully. It means your husband didn't write this name down as a casual contact. He wrote it down as a resource, someone he could call, someone who might help him with a problem. The word problem hung in the air. I understood what she meant. I was the problem. I can run the name through our systems, Renata continued. See what comes up, but I need you to understand something first. She looked at me directly, her gaze unwavering. Whatever we find, whatever we do next, you're going to need documentation. You're going to need a plan. And you cannot go back to that house alone. I nodded. I'd known this, somewhere in the part of my brain that had been slowly waking up over the past 9 months, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way that felt like stepping off a cliff. Where do I go? I asked. My dad answered before anyone else could. You stay here, as long as you need. The next 3 days existed in a strange suspended state. I called in sick to work, letting my voicemail collect messages I couldn't bring myself to answer. Lennox texted periodically, casual check-ins that felt like surveillance. Each message was a reminder that he didn't know what I knew. Each reply I sent was a small performance, a mask I wore through a screen. Feeling under the weather, staying at mom's for a few days. Hope you feel better. Miss you. Miss you. The words felt like a warning dressed as affection. Renata called on the 3rd day. She'd found Corbin Watts. He had a record. Nothing violent, technically. Petty theft in his 20s. A restraining order filed against him by an ex-girlfriend that had since expired. But it was his profession that made my blood run cold. He advertises himself as a private investigator, Renata explained over the phone, but his reputation in certain circles is different. He's the kind of person people hire when they want to know things, when they want to follow someone, or when they want to make sure someone doesn't disappear without a trace. I couldn't speak. There's no evidence he's done anything illegal recently, she continued, but the fact that your husband has his contact information, paired with that note, it's enough for concern, enough for a protective order if you want to pursue one. I thought about Lennox's face. The careful control he wore like a second skin, the way he could make anyone believe he was reasonable, thoughtful, devoted. A protective order would require convincing a judge that I was in danger from a man who'd never raised his hand to me, a man who brought flowers home every Friday, a man who called me sweetheart in public and told our friends how lucky he was to have found me. Will anyone believe me? I asked. Renata's pause told me everything. They should. Whether they will depends on how much evidence we can gather. The photographs help. The note helps. But I won't lie to you. These cases are hard. Men like your husband know how to present themselves. They know how to make women look unreasonable. Women like me, hysterical, oversensitive, imagining things. I thanked her and hung up. Then I sat on my childhood bed and cried until I couldn't breathe. My lawyer's name was Gideon Hartley. He was in his 60s with a gray beard and a calm, methodical way of speaking that made even the worst information feel manageable. My sister had found him through a colleague whose own divorce had involved similar circumstances. He specialized in cases where leaving wasn't just emotionally difficult. It was dangerous. We met at his office downtown, a converted brownstone with creaky floors and bookshelves that reached the ceiling. My mom came with me. She sat in the corner, silent but present, her hands folded in her lap like she was praying. Gideon spread my evidence across his desk, the photographs, the note, the journal entries, the screenshots of texts where Lennox had questioned my sanity, my memory, my perception of reality. This is coercive control, he said finally. It's not always recognized the way physical abuse is, but it's recognized. The photographs suggest stalking behavior. The note suggests premeditation. The journal demonstrates a pattern of psychological manipulation. So what do we do? I asked. First, we file for divorce. We do it quickly and quietly. We request a temporary restraining order based on the evidence of surveillance. We document everything moving forward. Every text, every call, every unexpected appearance. He paused. And we prepare for him to fight back. What does that mean? Gideon leaned back in his chair. Men like your husband don't let go easily. Control is their oxygen. When they feel it slipping away, they escalate. He may try to charm you back. He may try to intimidate you. He may try to turn people against you. Friends, family, colleagues. He may try to manipulate the legal system. You need to be ready for all of it. I thought about the version of Lennox that everyone else knew. The successful financial analyst, the devoted husband, the man who remembered everyone's birthday. and always offered to help with yard work. How many people would take his side simply because they couldn't imagine the person I was describing? "I'm ready," I said, even though I wasn't sure it was true. The papers were filed on a Thursday. By Friday evening, Lennox knew. He called 17 times. I let each call go to voicemail, watching my phone light up again and again on my parents' kitchen counter. My dad finally turned it face down, like the screen itself was something dangerous. The voicemails ranged from confused to pleading to something harder to name. The first few were almost reasonable. "Hey, I got some paperwork delivered today. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Can we talk?" By the 7th, his voice had changed. "I don't understand what's happening. After everything I've done for you, after everything we built together, you owe me an explanation." I owe him. Even now, even facing the dissolution of everything, he believed I was in his debt. The last voicemail came at midnight. His voice was calm again. Too calm, the kind of calm that preceded storms. "I know you're at your parents' house. I know you've been there all week. I'm not angry. I just want to understand. We can fix this. We've always fixed things together. Just come home, and we'll figure it out. I love you." I deleted it without replying. The restraining order was granted the following Tuesday. Temporary, pending a full hearing. The judge, a woman in her 50s with reading glasses perpetually sliding down her nose, had looked at the photographs with an expression I couldn't quite read. When she spoke, her voice was measured. "These images demonstrate a pattern of surveillance that the petitioner could not have been aware of. Combined with the written note referencing actions to be taken if she tries to leave, there is sufficient cause for concern." Lennox wasn't present. He'd been served notice but hadn't appeared. Gideon said this wasn't unusual. Some respondents thought ignoring the process would make it go away. Others were simply biding their time. I walked out of the courthouse into gray October light, the order folded in my purse. My sister was waiting by her car, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "How do you feel?" she asked, handing me one. "I don't know yet." I took a sip, letting the warmth spread through my chest. Lighter, maybe, but also like I'm waiting for something. "The other shoe to drop?" "Something like that." She put her arm around me. "Whatever drops, we catch it together." I wanted to believe her. I was trying to believe her. The weeks that followed were an exercise in rebuilding. I'd spent 9 months disappearing. Now I had to remember who I'd been before. Paloma was the first person I called. My best friend since college. The woman whose calls I'd stopped returning because Lennox said her influence was unhealthy for our marriage. She answered on the second ring. "I was wondering when you'd come back," she said. No accusation in her voice, just relief. We met for dinner that weekend at our old spot, a Thai restaurant with sticky menus and the best pad see ew in the city. She listened while I talked. She didn't interrupt, didn't offer advice, didn't try to fix anything. She just let me speak. The first time in nearly a year someone had done that without an agenda. "I'm sorry I disappeared," I said finally, pushing noodles around my plate. "You didn't disappear. You were taken." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "There's a difference. And you found your way back. That's what matters." I called my boss next. The promotion I'd turned down 6 months ago had been filled, of course, but there was a different position opening up, slightly different responsibilities, same salary band. She told me it was mine if I wanted it. "We missed you," she said. "Not just your work. You. The team hasn't been the same." I accepted. Starting over felt less like defeat and more like reclamation. The full restraining order hearing was scheduled for late November. Gideon warned me that Lennox would likely appear this time, likely with his own attorney, likely with a strategy designed to make me seem unstable. "He'll try to reframe the narrative," Gideon explained during our prep session. "The photographs were for safety because he was worried about you. The note was taken out of context. You misunderstood, misinterpreted, misremembered. He'll paint himself as the concerned husband blindsided by a wife's sudden mental breakdown. And the judge will believe that? The judge will consider both sides. Our job is to make sure your side is more credible, more documented, more undeniable." He tapped my journal, now entered into evidence. "This helps. The timeline, the specificity, the consistency. It tells a story that's very hard to dismiss as paranoia." I nodded. I'd been preparing for this, rehearsing my testimony, going over dates and incidents until they were carved into my memory like scripture. But nothing truly prepared me for seeing him again. Lennox entered the courtroom in a navy suit I'd picked out for him 2 Christmases ago. He looked good, rested, composed, the picture of professional stability. His attorney was a sharp-faced man named Prescott something, the kind of lawyer who billed $500 an hour and earned every penny through meticulous aggression. I sat at my table with Gideon, my hands folded to keep them from shaking. My mom was in the gallery behind me, my sister, my dad, Paloma, a small army of witnesses to whoever I would become in the next few hours. Lennox didn't look at me, not once. He stared straight ahead, his jaw set, his posture rigid. I'd seen that stillness before. It was the quiet before the storm. The hearing began with Gideon presenting the evidence. The photographs displayed one by one on a screen for the judge and the court. The note, projected large enough that Lennox's handwriting was unmistakable. The journal entries, read aloud in a voice that wasn't mine, clinical and detached. Then it was my turn to speak. I walked to the witness stand on legs that felt like water. I sat down. I looked at the judge, not at Lennox, never at Lennox. And I told my story. I told her about the small comments that became constant criticism, the isolation that happened so gradually I didn't notice until I was alone, the way I'd learned to edit myself, to shrink, to become whatever shape would cause the least friction. I told her about the chicken parmesan, about the gaslighting, about finding the folder. I told her about the fear that had lived in my chest for months, a fear I couldn't name until I had evidence to prove it was real. When I finished, the courtroom was silent. Then Prescott stood up for cross-examination. He was good. I'll give him that. He didn't attack me directly. That would have seemed cruel, and cruelty doesn't play well in family court. Instead, he asked questions designed to make me doubt myself. Had I ever seen a doctor about my anxiety? Had I ever considered that my husband's attentiveness might simply be love? Was it possible that the photographs were taken by someone else, and my husband was simply holding onto them as evidence of stalking that he planned to report? That last one almost made me laugh. Almost. No, I said clearly. The note is in his handwriting. I've seen that handwriting every day for 3 years. On grocery lists, on birthday cards, on post-its left on my pillow. That's his hand. Those are his words. Prescott didn't flinch. You're certain? I'm certain. The judge called for a recess. I walked back to my seat on trembling legs, and my sister handed me a bottle of water without a word. The final ruling came after lunch. The judge granted the full restraining order. Lennox was prohibited from contacting me directly or indirectly, from coming within 500 feet of my person, my workplace, or my parents' home. The order would remain in effect for 1 year, with the option to extend if circumstances warranted. As she read the decision, I watched Lennox's face. The mask cracked just for a moment. I saw something flash in his eyes. Not defeat, but calculation. He was already planning his next move. But for now, the law was on my side. For now, I had a piece of paper that said I mattered, that my fear was legitimate, that his control would no longer be sanctioned by my silence. I walked out of the courthouse into afternoon sunlight. My mom hugged me first, then my dad, then my sister. Paloma stood at the edge of the group, grinning. How does freedom feel? She asked. I took a deep breath, the first full breath I'd taken in months. It feels like a beginning. The divorce was finalized in February. I didn't attend the final hearing. Gideon handled everything. The settlement was clean, if not entirely fair. Lennox kept the house, the one we'd dreamed of together, the one that had become my prison. I kept my sanity, my savings, and my name. I moved into a small apartment on the other side of the city. 1 bedroom, a galley kitchen, a view of a parking lot that somehow felt more beautiful than any granite countertop I'd ever owned. I painted the walls a soft blue, my choice, no one else's, and hung photographs of people I loved on every surface. Some nights I still woke up reaching for my phone, expecting texts that demanded response. Some mornings I caught myself asking permission from no one before I left for work. The habits of survival don't disappear overnight. But slowly, day by day, I remembered how to take up space. Spring came early that year. I was walking home from work one evening when my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Heart pounding, the old fear rising in my chest like a tide. The message was from Renata. Corbin Watts had been arrested. Not for anything related to my case, but for stalking another woman whose husband had hired him as a consultant. The arrest had led investigators to his files, which contained records of dozens of clients, dozens of targets. Your name is in there? Renata said. Your husband paid him a retainer. There are notes, dates, plans. Nothing was executed, but the intent is documented. I sat down on a park bench and listened to the message 3 times. Intent. Plans. The future Lennox had mapped out for me. The one where I didn't get away. But I did get away. Against every odd, every obstacle, every voice that told me I was overreacting, I got away. Summer brought a new project at work. I was leading a team for the first time, managing people who looked to me for direction. The responsibility felt foreign at first, almost uncomfortable. I'd spent so long being small that expansion felt like trespassing. My therapist helped me name it. You're learning to trust your own judgment again, she said. That takes time. Be patient with yourself. I tried. Some days I succeeded. Others, I failed spectacularly and had to start over. But even the failures felt different now, like learning, not like proof of my inadequacy. Paloma got engaged that summer to a woman named Delia who made her laugh in a way I'd never heard before. I was maid of honor at their wedding in October, standing in a garden surrounded by fairy lights and the faces of people who had held me up when I couldn't stand. During the reception, I caught my sister watching me from across the room. She raised her glass. I raised mine back. We didn't need words. We never had. 1 year to the day after the restraining order was granted, I drove past my old house. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to see it, to confirm it was real, that I had lived there, that I had left. The driveway was empty. The porch light was off. A for sale sign stood in the front yard, swaying slightly in the November wind. I didn't stop. I didn't need to. That house had never been mine. Not really. It had been a stage set for someone else's version of happiness, decorated with my compliance, furnished with my silence. My apartment was waiting for me, my blue walls, my photographs, my life. I drove home. 2 years later, I got a letter. Not from Lennox. The restraining order had been extended and he'd moved out of state, according to Gideon. The letter was from a woman I didn't know. Her name was Ingrid Thorne. She'd found me through a survivors forum I'd started posting in, sharing my story anonymously at first, then with my real name once I felt strong enough to own it. She wrote that my words had helped her recognize what was happening in her own marriage. She wrote that she'd left last month, was staying with her brother, was starting to remember who she'd been before. Thank you, she wrote, for making me feel less alone. I read the letter 3 times. Then I wrote back. We started exchanging emails, then phone calls. Then she asked if I'd be willing to speak at a conference on domestic violence awareness. My first instinct was to say no. I wasn't qualified. I wasn't healed enough. I wasn't ready. But then I thought about the woman I'd been 3 years ago, sitting in her car at 3 a.m., typing questions into her phone because she didn't know who else to ask. What would I have given to hear someone say, "You're not crazy, you're not alone, and yes, you can leave"? I said yes. The conference was held in a hotel ballroom downtown. 500 people in the audience, survivors, advocates, therapists, lawyers, researchers. I stood backstage with sweating palms and a throat that felt too tight for words. My mom was in the front row, my dad beside her, my sister, Paloma, Renata, all the people who had caught me when I fell. I walked to the podium. I looked out at the sea of faces, and I told them about the woman who'd sat in her car at 3 a.m., the woman who'd found a folder, the woman who'd run, and the woman who'd survived. I didn't have all the answers. I still had nightmares sometimes. I still flinched at certain tones of voice, still checked my locks 3 times before bed, still felt the old fear rise unexpectedly in moments of vulnerability. But I was here. I was standing. I was speaking with a voice that had been silenced for so long. And that, I told them, was the whole point. Not triumph, not perfection, just survival. Just the stubborn insistence on existing when someone had tried to erase you. Just the slow, difficult, beautiful work of coming back to yourself. I still have the folder, not the original. That's in evidence storage somewhere, part of a case file that will eventually be archived and forgotten. But I made copies before I turned it over. The photographs, the note, the proof of what was planned. Sometimes I take it out and look at it. Not to relive the fear, but to remember how far I've come. The woman in those photographs, followed, watched, documented. She didn't know she was being hunted. She didn't know her routine had been mapped, her exits calculated, her every move recorded for someone else's use. But she's the one who found the folder. She's the one who ran. She's the one who rebuilt a life from the rubble of someone else's design. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't opened that desk drawer. I try not to think about it. The what-ifs are a trap I can't afford to fall into. What I know is this. I typed a question into my phone at 3 a.m., and somewhere in the asking, I found an answer. I wasn't being immature. I was being brave. And sometimes bravery looks like leaving a house with granite countertops and a mortgage you can barely pronounce. Sometimes it looks like sitting in a driveway with your hands shaking and your heart breaking and your whole future uncertain. Sometimes it looks like choosing yourself when everyone else has taught you that you shouldn't. I chose myself, finally after everything, and I'd do it again.